Okay, 12. This is particularly good for us hippie people because that was what the hippie counterculture moved to. Age of Aquarius, the sexual revolution. This was a time of change where we took, for us, we looked at the previous. This is what all the roles were of people. Not just gender roles, but any role. This is what you were supposed to be. And we kind of went, huh, this is what we're going to be. Okay? Wish I could recreate Woodstock. Anyways, but these drugs were touted as a way to expand one's mind. They didn't realize, for the most part, just how expanding that would be, but anyways. So, distortions in perception is kind of the nice way of putting it, okay? It can mean you hear things you shouldn't, see things you shouldn't, feel cold when it's hot, feel hot when it's cold, feel heavy when it's not. It just changes how your little brain works, okay? So you can also see things that aren't there, or what you're seeing is then distorted. Think of that alcoholic that's going through the DTs and feeling the bugs under their skin, okay? This is kind of this on steroids. And it was definitely mind expanding. So the most known, of course, is acid, LSD, lysergic acid diethylamide. There are some others, and these are not the ones people tend to think of as being in this class of drugs. Anti-anxiety drugs are included in this class, as are most of the sedative hypnotics. Okay? All of them can produce some pretty profound distortions that people don't expect. When they're taking an anti-anxiety med, they don't think that there's going to be any kind of distortion. Same with the sedative hypnotic. It's just kind of like, wow, that bridge is moving. Okay, I need to move that way as I fall off the bridge. So, problems, obviously. Now, those that think this stuff is good, like I said, psychedelic, that's the mind expanding. Ethanogenic was the one I, even to this day, kind of laugh at. The divine within. You were supposed to get a better relationship with your maker, whoever that maker might be.
Is it kind of like saying opening up your third eye?
There it is.
Okay.
Perfect. Perfect. Now, the negative side, can a person look like they're having psychosis? Yeah, you know, when your boss is having a flashback, he's 40 years old, and he decides to get undressed in the middle of a meeting and walk out naked downstairs to the company's fountain and start dancing in the water. And all the employees are like going, okay. And the last time he took LSD was probably close to 30 years prior. So, yeah, psychotic, sure. Mind disrupting, psychodysleptic, mind dissolving, psycholytic. There's different names that they have attached to these drugs, mainly because the trip, so to speak, when you take the drug, it's called going on a trip, can be incredibly good or incredibly bad. The one I remember the most from high school, out of all the different drug things that were going on, was the kid who decided he could fly. He was in the middle of an acid trip. He climbed on top of the basketball backstop and flew. Unfortunately, his flight was very short, and it was very straight down, and while he survived, he was a quad. Okay. So, yeah, bad trip. Bad trip. So we separate these things out, or try to, in categories. Usually it's about their effect and what they do. And the best way they found to do this was to look at the transmitters we have in our brain, neurotransmitters, and say, okay, this drug is similar to this one, similar to that one, and so on. So we have basically 4: serotonin, norepinephrine, acetylcholine. These are the 3 most known transmitters in the brain. 90% of the signals sent in the brain are signaled through one of these transmitters. And then we had to have a catch-all category other, because we couldn't match it to anything else. Okay, so serotonin then, LSD, psilocybin, usually called Cybin for short, morning glory seeds, DMT, we'll talk about that one, and harmine. Magic mushrooms, Norepinephrine, that's mescaline, and several others there. Again, we'll talk about each one of these separately. Chemically similar to acetylcholine, these are drugs that are used medicinally on a fairly regular basis. Anybody who's in the military and may be in an area that is subject to chemical weapons warfare will be issued atropine and a self-injector, much like my EpiPen. Is just slam it in and go, okay? Outside of that effect, it's used to speed up the heart. Somebody who's experiencing what we call bradycardia, the heart beating too slow, might be given atropine to get things going. It also is used in a lot of nasal surgery because it dries up nasal secretions. So it allows them to do whatever surgery they're doing. You don't want to come across that drug. It's known as truth serum drug.
Which one?
Scopolamine. CIA, oh yeah, the truth drug. What it does not force you to tell the truth. It simply lowers inhibitions enough that it's hard to lie. Okay, so the person still has to know what questions to ask, how to ask them, but the person will no longer have any kind of an inhibition against telling the truth. So, very common use. Hyoscyamine is similar to it, same with the ibotenic acid. Those are all drugs that just kind of mellow out any resistance. Very commonly used in psychological interrogations. Okay. Chemically unlike any other, PCP, oh, we'll have a fun talk about that. That's not a drug you want to deal with either as a law enforcement officer, and I'll give you a great story on that when we get to it. Ketamine is very commonly used in both human and animal medical sciences, mainly as a very, very strong sedation or what we call a precursor to anesthesia. Okay. I've seen it used, I haven't seen it used on humans, but I have seen it used on horses and men. It's before they can even finish giving it to them, they're hitting the ground. It's kind of a good thing, you know, having them fight while you're doing stuff is not a good idea. And this is an oddball one here that they really haven't figured out how to classify, because I don't think they know really what's in it, but PCP and ketamine are the main drugs. So let's talk about the drugs themselves. So acid, by far the most known. Okay. What always made me smile was the fact that it comes from a fungus. You can get it if you eat wild mushroom, because it can be found on certain varieties of wild mushrooms. Now, of course, you have to be very careful about that because some of those are poisonous. So, you know, you're going to go on one last bad trip out the door. That's pretty much what's going to happen here. So Hoffman is our chemist that tried to figure out what drug he could use to create or treat issues in childbirth. One of the things that can happen is a woman who doesn't shed the placenta after birth. It breaks open, the baby comes out, but the placenta, for the most part, is still attached to the uterine wall. The uterus will continue to contract, trying to push it out. If it doesn't, two bad things happen. One is the amount of bleeding. Okay? And it can be fatal. So they've got to get, if you watch any video on childbirth, you'll notice someone rubbing right on the bones where the baby was, and they're rubbing very, very firmly on it. It's known as the fundus, to try and continue to get the uterus to contract, and push that placenta out. It can also create some other issues with bones if it stays in. Animals, it's just as much of a problem. Okay, anytime that placenta is retained, it is considered an obstetric emergency. So this was one of the things that he tried to fix with, and as he went through his various, well, let's see if this works, let's see if that works, the final one he came to was called LSD-25, simply because it was the 25th variation that he tried. Okay, not very inventive. Okay, so who is this guy? From Switzerland, finally not a German one, but I guess close enough. Okay, here's a research chemist, and he went on his first trip because he didn't realize how the powder obviously can get around, just like fentanyl, can get around whatever you're on, and how teensy tiny of an amount will send you on a trip, just like fentanyl. Okay, this is another one that you have to be enormously careful of if somebody blows some powder towards you, you might overdose quite easily. Okay, very, very small. So he takes this trip, and actually, he's a scientist. Okay, we write down everything. So he writes down exactly what's happening to him. Of course, it got a little weird to read after a while, but he did write down exactly what was happening. First thing he recorded was the fact that his vision was affected. That what he was looking at, a person might be moving. Okay. A common one I've heard from those that have used it, if they're in a house with curtains, is the curtains billowing in and out, or the walls billowing in and out. Okay, common visual hallucination. And as he put it, what he saw and what he heard didn't necessarily go together. So if he heard banging and then just saw the gentle billowing, well, banging doesn't go with that. That's the kind of intermingling he was talking about. They didn't match. Okay? Basically, the brain's just firing, but he doesn't know this yet. So the FDA actually approves a pharmaceutical company to make doses of this stuff. They sent them samples to see if this is something they could use medicinally. Found out pretty quick, no, it ain't gonna work. There was absolutely no medical use for then and now for LSD. But in the 60s, this hit that mindset, a rejection of everything. Okay, this was, if your parents did it, we didn't want it. Okay, this is that rebelling against the establishment, not the government, the establishment. Although I guarantee if you'd asked any one of us what the establishment was, we wouldn't have been able to answer. Okay, that was just the buzzword that was used. Anything that was the norm. Nah, didn't want it. We need to do something different, whatever that might be. And everybody's, of course, interpretation of what was different was different. So everybody's running around like chickens with their heads cut off, but, we were toking weed and enjoying a few other experiences. Okay? So it was inextricably and still is linked to that time period. Okay, if you ask somebody on the street about the hippie movement and counterculture and drugs, guaranteed this is the drug they're going to mention. They're not going to remember any of the others, and there's plenty of other psychedelics that were used, but acid was by far the most common. So obviously when they figured out there was no good for this, and having a guy decide that he can open a plane door and fly, there was a couple of those. We had one that thought he could swim with the fishes, so he leaped off a boat. Yeah, he'd never swam before in his life, so he didn't swim very well. Yeah, we're going to ban this one. So when they went instantly to Schedule 1 by 66, which is, of course, where it has remained. I can't see it ever coming off because of that one major issue, which we're going to talk about here in a minute, which is something very unique to LSD. Okay, so let's talk about the effects. Again, like fentanyl, it's one of the most powerful micrograms. So we're just like fentanyl. That teeny tiny itty bitty amount. And it made it a headache for correctional officers because they could put 5 doses underneath the postage stamp, put your thumb on it, and you couldn't feel it because it was that tiny. Okay. Very, very quickly absorbed. Your trip starts pretty quick. How long? Well, that depends on the person. Officially, chemically, the half-life is 3 hours. But there have been trips recorded longer than a full day. So it just depends on the user. And one thing they found out fairly quickly was the user's own experience sometimes set the effect. So if they were expecting to have a great trip, that this was going to be fun, wonderful, and terrific, they probably had a pretty good trip. If they were nervous, anxious, scared for whatever reason, and they might have one of those wild trips, let's step off the side of an airplane. So the user itself, and this was one drug even amongst users, because I remember hearing this all the time, you never took it alone. You never, never, ever took this drug alone. You had someone. I was there for my sister when she tried it. Luckily, she had a good trip, but it was like, oh, I don't think I like this stuff. She said the bathtub was moving. It was wiggling through the bathroom, and it was just kind of like, okay, how long is this gonna last? Oh my God. Yeah, that was, no thanks. And she never did it again either, because she just said it was way freaky, way freaky. Anyways, so over in general, 5 to 12 hours, again, it depends on the dose level, the individual, smaller dose, bigger individual, it's gonna go relatively quick. And this is what makes it bad. You can't smell it, you can't taste it, you can't nothing. So you have no idea it's there. So if I wanted to mess with somebody, I know she usually has her computer. So I put that little micro dot on the top of her computer. She opens the lid, off she goes. It's not hard. Fentanyl's no different. Okay. These ones that are so potent can be hidden very easily. Okay. So, what actually happens? What are you feeling? Well, euphoric, yeah. And they can be kind of get real restless. Like someone just hit them with 12 Red Bulls. Okay? Kind of dancing in the aisle. Laughing, crying depends on the mood as they're going into it. And if they're a first-time user. A first-time user may be overwhelmed. So, again, it just depends. Body temperature goes up. This is where we get people getting naked. Very common reaction to taking this drug is them getting naked because they overheat. So, blood pressure goes up, heart rate goes up, pupils get blown very large, look like a cat in the dark. There's a special receptor in the brain, serotonin 2A, that is the most affected by this. Just the fact that it affects the brain is what you guys need to know. But it definitely wires them up. So when you ask them, what's going on? Synesthesia. That's that intermingling of the senses. Feeling colors, seeing sounds. Okay? Now, some people are actually born with this. It's not common, but some people are born with this. But obviously, LSD is helpful in that. They call it a multi-level reality. Some say they can see into the future or can see into the past and in their head affect the past. Kind of weird. Looking at things, say they're looking at a staircase, and you and I see 10 stairs going up, they see 25 stairs going down into a dark level basement, and you're looking at the exact same thing. So how their brain is perceiving it is off. And that's probably the number one way they'll describe it. You see an upward staircase, they see it downward. Okay? And that they call it the movie without a screen. They close their eyes, the images are perfectly clear to them. They don't need to, they said it's like watching a movie behind their eyes. All right? Clear. Now, some other things that can happen, both good and bad. Mood swings, feelings of panic, yeah, they can get overwhelmed really easily. Okay? And again, that was one of the bigger reasons for having someone there, because if they, as we called it, wigging out, if they wigged out, they could easily get themselves killed, because this is where they're leaping off of things and running into things. Okay? Timelessness, yeah, they might have been in the midst of their trip for 6 hours, and they think 5 minutes has passed. Okay, so that really gets them going.
Sometimes it's the opposite too, right? Like they feel like they've been there for years.
Yeah.
Feel trapped and scared.
And it's only been a couple of minutes or an hour.
Yeah, it's scary.
Again, everything they perceive is off. And that is disorienting, even to someone who's not in the middle of a trip. And these guys are definitely in the middle of a trip. And another one is that they are no longer in their body. Now, we've gotten that from the near death. We hear it from soldiers in particular that have died and are brought back. These guys are definitely not dead, but they feel like they'll tell you they're looking down at their body. Friends are doing stuff, moving them, whatever. And what's even weirder, though the person is out cold, That's why the rest of the people are trying to help and whatnot. They're perceiving it. And then when they do wake back up, their recollections are accurate. So there's something definitely odd going on. Okay. So, like I said, like far out. The bad trips, and this is the extremely bad part of this, LSD is fat soluble, not water soluble. So you don't pee this out. Unfortunately, one of the fat cells that it likes to attach to the most is in the brain. So it's sitting up there and nicely encapsulated in this fat cell until for whatever reason that fat cell's nucleus breaks. Cell dies. And now that LSD is released directly back into the brain, and we have trip number 2 that might be 40 years after that first and only trip. It can happen after just one time. It's something to this day my sister's paranoid about. And she should be. Because it's up there. Just maybe she got lucky the cell hasn't broke. Okay? But if it does, they're usually right back in the middle of another trip. Like I said, that guy in the fountain, it had been 40 years. When he was a kid, he did the one time. And they found him naked dancing in the company fountain. And he's like 50 some odd years. That probably wasn't a good view.
Was he able to keep his job or no?
Yes, actually. He went into rehab. They got him over it. The good thing is once it breaks and the LSD is released, that's unless there's more cells that have LSD in them, usually that's it. You're not going to do a third trip. But what a way to come out to your coworkers. Okay, psilocybin comes from mushrooms. And most usual locations there. The Aztecs actually had a name for it. Don't ask me to pronounce this because I can't. But it translates to God's flesh. They would eat these to commune with the gods. Their medicine men or high elder type people would eat this stuff so they could commune with the gods. So Hoffman was the one, since he worked on LSD, he figured out what makes the mushroom work. It is similar to LSD, it's just nowhere near as strong. So we don't have as intensive a trip. And this one we don't have, that I know about, any future trips. Once this one's over, it's over. Relatively easy to get. This one's not that hard, still. It's just not super common. I'll look at myself. Even if I was into this stuff, I can't stand mushrooms. I don't like mushrooms. I don't like funguses. So if I don't like that, why would I eat a weird mushroom? No thanks. Just not for me. So there's those that won't eat it for that reason. Others that do want this simply because they want what LSD would provide, but they're afraid of it. So let's use this as, kind of a lower level type of thing. Okay. Questions on psilocybin? LAA, lysergic acid amide. Basically, it's missing one molecule. That's why the name's slightly different from LSD. This is the morning glory seeds, also another name that I can't pronounce and I'm not going to try. Was used by a lot of Native American tribes as well as other tribes around the world. Anyone who could get their hands on it across Central and South America would use these. And again, it was used in various rites that they had, whether it was healing, whether it was communing with their gods, or making it to the other side to have a conversation with ancestors type of thing. So very, very common, still used. Hoffman, once again, he was really into the whole hallucinogen thing. Again, similar to LSD, but now we're dropping even lower down the potency scale. So using it on a regular routine basis, usually they'll put a handful of the seeds and chew on them, is nowhere near the problem that either of the others are. Now, they are still available commercially, believe it or not, because there are people who like to grow the plant, not so much to take the seeds, but just enjoy the plant. So if you try and buy the seeds, what they did is they ended up putting this coating on it that apparently is really nasty. I have no idea, and I've never met anybody who's tried to take it, but that's what I've heard, is it's just nasty. So, anyways. Question about any of those? DMT comes from trees. Central South America again. This one, they crush it up in a wooden bowl, kind of mortar and pestle type of thing, and then they snort it. Tree bark up your nose. Ew. But anyways, they do it. This one again is mild compared to LSD. Some people started calling it the businessman's LSD because, one, the effects are very, very quick. This is something they could do on lunch. Okay, that's where that kind of came from. Happens really quick, and it's over by the time you have to go back to work. So you could go to lunch, get high, enjoy your trip, and go back to work. I don't know why you would, but anyways. On the other hand, this one has some negative effects, so it's not always a nice euphoric trip. It can send a person over the edge into a full-blown panic attack. So it just depends, again, on the individual, how they react to it. All right. Dimethyltryptamine is the actual name, DMT. Question about this one? Arnine, another bark-related one. Shamans there had boiled the bark and made a drink out of it. I'm not going to try and pronounce it. I don't know how. Anyways, very similar chemically when they analyzed it to serotonin. So it produces a euphoric feeling, a little bit of high. Some have described it as they're watching themselves from outside their body. A couple of bad things that can happen: flying and then being dropped back into your own body. And they say it's bad because your body gets squished, which I guess if you fell into it, you might squish the shell, I guess. I'm not quite sure. Never experienced this. The one that you hear the most common is that they see, hear, and feel their own death, even though they're not dead. Yeah, that's got to be a freaky feeling. Sometimes you look at this stuff going, and your point for taking it is what? I mean, okay, at least we're trying enlightenment here. Okay, mescaline peyote. All over the southern U.S. and northern South America. Very easy to find. Hippies ran around all over the place in the Mojave and whatnot looking for the peyote plant. It's a cactus plant, but it has no spines on it. Very easy to identify and find, and they would just collect it. Anyway. Used very commonly amongst many of the Native American tribes, to the extent, if I remember correctly, don't quote me on this one, if I remember correctly, for those incarcerated in the United States that have Native American membership ancestry that they can prove. And there's a couple of rituals that involve the use of peyote. They are allowed to use it. And usually it's sweat lodge, but there's some other rituals that they can use it. So it's pretty well known that these groups use it. And quite a few different, the Chiricahua, Apache, the other one I can't think of now. Navajo, I think, used it. Chippewa used it. Cherokee used it. Comanche used it. So a lot of the different tribes used it. Now, as you move east towards Florida, no, they didn't use it. The ones in Central South. Anyways, very, very bitter. Okay. For those taking it for a high, it's very often in some sort of strong liquid, usually liquor of some sort, which is never a good idea because now you're mixing a drug with alcohol, but it does hide the taste, but we do that. Some have said it's so bad that they actually start throwing up. It's that bitter, which again, why are you taking it? Anyways, And some extreme levels of nausea, as in, like, they can't stop throwing up. Where's the pleasure in this? I don't understand. But anyway, so, questions about any of those? No? This is a synthetic. They wanted something to wake themselves up, but not with the side effects of amphetamine. So they tinkered around, and they wanted what they called STP, and we were kind of big into the acronyms then too. So serenity, tranquility, and peace for World Cup. Just watch the Miss America contest. I want world peace. They all say the same damn thing every time. Anyway, very, very strong as far as mescaline is concerned, if you're using that as a comparison, but nowhere near as strong as LSD. Here's where this one gets interesting. It lasts. And again, it depends on the individual. It can last longer than that, but that's the average, is at least a full day. So if somebody's having an issue, which we list here, okay, panic attacks, full-on psychotic breaks, that's not a good thing. These people, if they have a so-called bad trip, will very often end up in a psychiatric ward, rubber room style. And they'll have to be restrained because they can get incredibly violent towards themselves, towards anybody else. Okay, so this one can get really ugly. And we can't, there's a lot of these drugs, if they're having a so-called bad trip, there's nothing we can do about it, except keep them from hurting themselves. In our jail, 99.9% of them, the rest were transferred to an actual psychiatric facility. We had one cell that was like 10 feet from our intake. That's a solid rubber room. That's all it is. The padding in there is about yay thick. There's a small screened opening of the floor, which it all slopes in there in case they throw up, urinate, poop, whatever. Okay. And a lot of times they're in there wearing a straight jacket. And it could take 5, 6 of us to get them in there. That's how bad it can get. So, anyway. Now the next one you guys, I'm sure have heard of, ecstasy. It came out as a designer drug, and originally shrinks were trying it to see if it would work with PTSD, anti-anxiety. There was a few different things that they tried it for, and no, wasn't working at all. A lot of bad side effects. So as a result, it was banned and put on Schedule 1, so no medical use. In the 90s, this was the drug at any kind of rave. The wilder and bigger the rave was, the more ecstasy was being passed around. A common picture we would have was these monster 1950s punch bowls that you might see like at a wedding for 200-300 people, and that bowl would be filled with ecstasy, and people would grab it by the handful. Okay. Different names there that you can see. It is falling out of favor simply because there's the good effects, if you get them, are short-lived. The bad effects can go on for a while. So, benefit versus not. Okay. Another very bad thing for this is it remains in the system, and as it does damage, that damage remains. It doesn't go away. So even as they come off the drug, whatever damage it may have caused through its toxicity stays. Which even for most drugs, once you get them off it, you get them healing, you start, get them eating right, exercising, whatever, a lot of the negatives can be reversed. This is one drug that can't. It's kind of like, when the cocaine person rots their nose away, the only way they can fix it is to rebuild it. I mean, it's plastic surgery, that's it. Okay, it's not like you can heal it. So, hyperthermia, heat stroke, oh yeah, remember, hyper, up. This is another drug that puts people running down the street in 40 degrees below zero saying they are hot. And they freeze to death. Because generally everybody in the rave is doing their own thing. This person's losing it, runs out the door, undressing as they go, and they're found outside totally frozen. I mean, like block of ice frozen. Okay. They can also get full-on heat stroke, which can be fatal as well. Massive heart damage, your brain swells, and that's a major problem because, you know, there's no room in there. If it swells, the only thing we can do is cut a big section of your skull off to allow the brain room to swell. And then as the swelling goes down, they put the bone back. Well, if you're not right next to a, you know, hospital, surgery, neurosurgeon to do something like that, well, you're going to squash your own brain. Blood pressure and heart rate, of course, go through the roof. But here's the long-term cognitive impairment. It short circuits your brain, and those connections are not rebuilt. Now, depending on how many and where, your brain might do a workaround where they kind of build some new connections over here instead of the ones that they can't use anymore. But then sometimes they can't, and that's it. Memory is probably the number one, where they lose massive chunks of their memory and lose the ability to form new ones. So they live in the now. What's happening right this second? They can't remember what happened an hour ago because they have no short-term memory, and without the short-term, it's never laid into the long-term either. So they don't have any, right? Kind of permanent amnesia. Impulse control, they have none. I love the way the book puts it. Reductions in, they don't have any. Okay? They're going to do whatever they're going to do. And as I said, memory goes down, attention span's about the same level as a gnat. Okay? You could be sitting there going, and in between, they're losing you. Okay? So, yeah, ecstasy's not a, and we had a lot of issues with this, dealing with it because of the amount of overdoses, people dropping dead from the heat stroke or running around in weather they shouldn't be running around. I mean, if you're in Southern California, knock yourself out. Okay? Our idea of freezing to death is 55 degrees. Okay? So, but if you're in Wisconsin, you're in New York, yeah, good luck with running around in the middle of winter. Even here, obviously that can be a major issue, so, yeah, problem. This one's called the fly mushroom. Agaric is most usually not used, just known as the fly mushroom. Because it, if you look at it, there's flies on it that are just kind of loopy. And they eat this stuff. Wouldn't you wonder about a bug that's like off? Yeah? No, apparently not. Anyways, so they eat this stuff. It's been around forever. They have writings. I'm trying to think of the earliest one. It's back Roman times. Okay. Major problems here. First of all, the person can overdose exceedingly easily. It just depends on how much each mushroom has, and there's no way of knowing. You just eat it, and either you live or you don't, which is great. And of those that it's not lethal, this is one that, from a law enforcement perspective, we have a major problem with because they get seriously aggressive. And it might be someone half the size of me trying to challenge something the size of Hulk Hogan. It's kind of like, you know, Chihuahuas. They have no idea how small they are, but man, they'll attack a lion. And that's sometimes what happens here is you got this little bitty dude trying to attack somebody who's 3 times their size. It doesn't end well for them. So, this one. All right, let's get to the good one. Phencyclidine. New name, they call it dissociative anesthetic hallucinogen. Dissociative, you don't remember it. Anesthetic, pain relieving. Hallucinogen, of course, you're off the wall here. So there are some pain reducing properties here. Mainly what's happening is the signals that would cause pain. So I take a baseball bat and go, boom, and I break her arm. And that arm starts sending a million signals to her brain. Ow, 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 ow. But if those signals never get there, then she's going to continue to use that arm until it falls off, completely and totally. Let me give you the extreme example here. Guy's changing the tire on his car. Now, just like any other state highway patrol, our California Highway Patrol, Chippies, AAA with a badge, That's their number one mandate, is to help stranded motorists. So this guy he sees the car, he goes to help. What he doesn't know is the guy's in the middle of a full-blown PCP enjoyment trip. He approaches the guy turns on him with a tire iron. So now we have a Keystone Cops comedy as the guy's chasing the cop around his car with the tire iron. Meanwhile, the officer empties his handgun. Out of the this is back in the revolver standpoint. So 6 bullets, 4 of them hit the guy. Didn't even slow him down. So the cop, I need more than just my little handgun. He's called for help. He makes it back to his car where his shotgun is. Standard shotgun that we carry has a bullet known as a double-aught buck. It has 8 pellets in each round that are .33 caliber, .33, where a standard handgun, .38. That's your standard handgun size. This has .33, but it has 8 of them in each one of those rounds. The Remington 870 pump that we carried, we had 4 rounds. So you do the math. He emptied the shotgun into this dude before he finally had the good grace to drop of blood loss. Guy looked like a colander. He had so many holes in him. That's what he died from, was blood loss. Bullets that had hit his heart, throat, almost every major organ he had, kidneys, liver, pancreas, lungs, and he was still moving. It wasn't till the brain shut off through blood loss that he fell down. Because none of the pain signals were hitting here. So he just kept going. That's scary. That is absolutely scary. So this idea of many of our restraints that we use in the field are based on pain response. So if I bend a body part in a certain way, ow, and the person stops resisting. So I can put handcuffs on and do whatever it is I need to do. What if they're not doing ow? The bone will break and they'll just keep going. So when you're trying to get someone that is on PCP into custody, good luck. Good luck. Generally, you need a psychiatric nurse to hit them with some of the major anesthetic type drugs before you can get them under control. Because you will break bones trying to get them under control. That's all there is to it. You can't stop them. So it's not about size. Everyone thinks, it makes them all really strong. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. If I go to lift a car, as soon as that weight hits, and even if I refuse to let go, the muscles are going to start to tear, joints are going to give way, and pain is going to go, ow, I let go of the car. They keep lifting till their arms fall off. Oh, I saved my kid. Okay, so this is why from a law enforcement perspective, this one's dangerous. Getting them under control is almost impossible. It's Schedule 2. It was used for surgical anesthesia. It is still used on occasion for some of the largest animals if they're doing a elephant, hippo, that type of thing. They'll still use it, but other than that, no. And I don't even think here in the U.S., I think that's only in from some of the preserves like in Kenya or something like that, where they deal with those animals on a regular basis. Angel dust is a common one. Ketamine is just part of it. Okay, ketamine is very much still used, both surgical human, surgical animal. So ketamine is very much used. It came on the outside market, meaning the illegal market, probably, I think this was just before we moved out here, so I want to say right around 2000, because I remember telling my vet, lock it up. Since I could have sworn I had a brand new bottle back here and now it's not there, we'd already heard the reports that there was a new drug on the scene that they were doing, and they were stealing it off of vet trucks. And the only thing I could think of the match was the ketamine. So now vets and everybody, it's kept behind the counter, it's locked up. There's no longer easy access. All right. But it's the same type of thing. It's just not quite as crazy inducing And if a person takes an intravenous dose, all they're gonna do is knock themselves out. Which is okay. They're easy to arrest if they're unconscious. Not so easy when they're trying to kill you. And that's when bullets don't help you. Because you only have so many bullets. Your taser, oh yeah, good luck. They'll probably rip it out of themselves and go zap you with it. So that's not gonna help. Yeah. So, and some names, Special K, Super K are probably the most common for ketamine. Angel dust, a common thing for those of you guys who indulge in weed, which of course I know none of you absolutely do. Be careful. If somebody wants to mess with you, one of the favorite things they like to do, because both of these are available in liquid forms, is they will take a joint and either dip the whole joint in it, or they'll wet down the papers before they roll the joint. Either way, you're going to get one hell of a dose of one of these two drugs. Do not let, it's just like ladies covering your drinks. Okay, it's the same type of thing here. Do not take a joint somebody hands you because you have no idea what's in it. Number two, don't let them make you. If you're into it, use your own papers and drugs, because man, this can go very, very bad very, very quickly. Okay. They call those cools after the cigarette, K-O-O-L-S. Very, very common. They like to give them to grade school kids for their first time using weed. So you can imagine the end result. It doesn't go over well. So, acute effect, manic excitement, oh, that's putting it mildly. Okay? Then they come back down. Their anxiety is absolutely through the roof. The world is going to crash in. They're going to die. Somebody's going to kill them, something. The mood changes will go so damn fast you can't keep up. Disordered, confused. Yeah, they're confused. Okay? Just don't even bother trying to talk to them because it's not going to connect. And you might say the wrong thing that sends them into an extreme panic because you have no idea how they're processing it. And so you have to be very careful. The aggression side, do not touch them unless they are aware. Facing them, I'm going to, and I'll tell them 27 times to make sure they're getting it. Coming up behind and touch them, God help you. It's going to react like a rhino on LSD. Not a good idea. And like I said, you're not going to be able to stop them. Because you are going to feel the pain. They aren't. So it get very ugly very, very quickly. There was a woman on a plane who apparently went into the bathroom before they were taxiing and started kind of getting a little wigged out in her seat. Yeah. There was like 9 Marines on that plane that just about sat on her. They had her taped to the seat. That's one of their common ways to control passengers, to duct tape you to the seat. She kept breaking through. So they literally had these guys, big old bruiser type guys. I guess they were probably flying home, for leave or something. And they literally sat on her till that pilot could get that plane on the ground and get her off. Now it takes an act of God to get her off the plane. Okay? They ended up deplaning everybody because she's fighting so hard. And geez, you have this much room going down that aisle, and she's flailing around. Yeah, she's going to break somebody's skull. So they had to deplane everybody, get her off, decon the plane, because they don't know what she was on, before they let people back on. Yeah, not a flight you want to be anywhere near. Given how bad this was, it kind of died off for a while, but it's back. And again, we've gotten good enough on the chemicals that they can do some slight manipulations and bring it back. And like I said, the number one thing, if they want to mess with somebody, is to put it on marijuana in a joint. And that's just incredibly dangerous because most people don't think much, if anything, about smoking a joint. Whether they do or they don't want to, maybe they have friends that, like to light up a blunt every once in a while. Okay. But they don't know the one they just bought was soaked in PCP. And you're the sober one that's going to be trying to deal with it. So it's something to keep in mind, just like you do keeping your drink safe. If you indulge, be very, very careful. There. We'll do two more. We'll do one on ketamine itself, and then we'll do one just starting that whole idea of sedative hypnotics, and then I'll cut you loose. So ketamine, been around for a long time. It was used just in the medical field and just for veterinarians. Very common. If you weren't a vet or had livestock or something, or worked in a hospital, you wouldn't have known it even existed. It was just there. Somebody figured it out, who knows, okay? It became kind of the new wonder drug for those who wanted something similar to PCP, but were afraid of PCP itself. Okay, smart move. But ketamine has one major side effect that can get people in trouble. For example, they're walking down the street and they're perfectly capable of walking across the street through traffic because, traffic isn't there anymore. Until they're sent 40 feet through the air, by some car doing 50 miles an hour. People have done this on the freeway where they got out of the car, hey, I need you to stop, get out of the car and decide to take a little trip across the freeway. Yeah, do that across the 45. Where the average trucker speed's about 80. Yeah, you can be turned into pate on the road. Number one way they get it is stealing it from vets. Like I said, I told all of mine when this first came out, because I had horse vets, dog vet, any of these, I said, if you're carrying it anywhere, this is one now you need to lock up. And unfortunately, they have large quantities because, again, we're giving them to horses and cows and stuff, so they have a larger bottle. And that's a lot for a human. They can, make a lot of money selling this stuff. Cost them, I bought a bottle not that long ago. I want to say it was $180 for 100 milliliters. That will last me about 2 years, right up until its expiration date. And that's for horses, which we give a fairly large dose to. For humans, that's probably about 200 doses. And it can sell on the street for as high as $50 a dose, so you do the math. Okay? And how many vets have anything built in to lock away? They don't. If you look at the back of their trucks, they got this little thing that sits in the back of the pickup truck, and you just flip the lid, pull the shelf out. Oh, cornucopia drugs. 1 million different drugs in there. So, yeah. So, ketamine. All right, so these then, and we'll stop here, leave the rest for Thursday. And again, as soon as I get back to my office, I'll make sure the 11th is uploaded for you guys or released. I don't know what I did. Anyways, so sedative and hypnotic are not necessarily the exact same thing, okay? Sedatives take you down. Doesn't necessarily affect the brain, it affects the body. Okay? We have drugs that control this, tranquilizer. Then we have sedation, which affects this. Very often we use the two together because it does no good to bring the body down if the mind's spiraling out of control. And getting the mind down doesn't mean the body isn't flailing around. So it's very commonly used together. Okay? Two main classes, barbiturates and those that are not barbiturates. This class is important because barbiturates are one of those drugs that if a person is truly addicted, they can only be treated medically because it can induce fatal seizures. So a person who's addicted to, say, Valium, sedative, has to be done in a hospital setting because as they detox off of it, they will have some righteous seizures. Not unusual for them to end up on a respirator or intubated until we can get the seizure stopped. Because the drugs that we give to epileptics for seizures are sedation drugs. We can't give it to them because they already have an addiction problem. So all of those drugs that we would give an epileptic are off the table. Valium's the number one drug that's given to an epileptic that's in the middle of a seizure. Well, these guys are withdrawing from Valium. We don't want to give them any more. So they just have to ride it out. And since seizures, you stop breathing, that's a problem. So they end up in an induced coma on a respirator till their body flushes the drug out of their system. It's really kind of ugly. Anyways, with that being said, we'll see you Thursday.